There is a profound, almost cinematic tragedy in possessing a heart that feels the weight of the entire world. In the vast spectrum of human psychology, certain souls wander the earth not merely as participants in life, but as deep, silent observers of the human condition. They are the rarest among us, carrying a unique blend of intuitive vision and an overwhelming capacity for empathy. These individuals possess a beauty of spirit that is undeniably captivating. They are generous, endlessly kind, and uniquely equipped to heal the invisible wounds of those around them. But this extraordinary light, when left unguarded, often becomes the very thing that consumes them. Today, we journey into the beautiful but delicate mind of the ultimate giver, exploring the silent struggles that unfold when a heart becomes far too accommodating and when boundless empathy crosses the invisible line into self-destruction. To understand this deeply empathetic mind is to understand a life lived in constant resonance with the emotions of others. Imagine walking into a room and instantly feeling the unspoken sorrow, the hidden anxieties, and the quiet joys of every person present. This is not a learned skill. It is an involuntary reflex. They are naturally born givers, individuals who find their deepest fulfillment in the comfort and happiness of whoever stands before them. For them, generosity is not a mere polite gesture or a moral obligation. It is a fundamental expression of their existence. Whether it is stepping in to carry the financial burden of a struggling family member, or spending weeks searching for the absolute perfect, profoundly thoughtful gift for a friend, their ability to give is nothing short of an art form. This natural inclination to nurture is a spectacular gift to humanity. However, beneath this radiant generosity lies a perilous blind spot. The deeply empathetic soul often lacks the cruel but necessary mechanism of discernment. They give freely, fiercely, and continuously, without pausing to calculate the cost. They operate under a beautiful but flawed philosophy that love and help should be unconditional and infinite. But human energy is not infinite. A well, no matter how deep, will eventually run dry if water is only ever drawn from it and never replenished. By making themselves perpetually available, answering every distress call at any hour of the night, they unknowingly set a dangerous precedent. The world is quick to learn the mechanics of unconditional availability. When people realize they can depend on this unwavering pillar of support, a subtle shift occurs in the dynamic. Appreciation slowly morphs into expectation. The giver becomes a fixture, much like a lighthouse. The ships that pass by depend on the light to guide them through the storm, but they rarely stop to ask if the lighthouse keeper has enough oil to survive the night. People begin to take this profound generosity for granted, eagerly demanding more time, more energy, and more emotional labor, blissfully unaware that the foundation of the person they rely on is beginning to quietly crack under the immense weight. The root of this endless giving lies in a psychological framework that prioritizes external harmony over internal peace. Through a psychological function known as extroverted feeling, these individuals possess a radar that is permanently tuned to the emotional frequencies of the outside world. This radar is incredibly sensitive, making them painfully aware of what others need to feel comfortable, validated, and secure. Because they feel the discomfort of others so intensely, they naturally prioritize resolving that external discomfort above addressing their own exhaustion. They will silence their own internal alarms of fatigue, simply to ensure that the emotional atmosphere around them remains serene. This intense focus on external feelings creates a massive vulnerability when it comes to the architecture of personal boundaries. Poor boundary setting is the tragic Achilles heel of the profoundly empathetic soul. Imagine a sanctuary with beautifully decorated walls, magnificent stained glass, and an altar of pure gold, but utterly lacking a front door. Anyone can walk in at any time, muddying the floors and taking the gold, and the keeper of the sanctuary will simply smile and offer them a cup of tea. They might feel entirely depleted, their mind begging for a moment of solitude. Yet when a request for help arrives, the fear of disappointing another human being entirely overrides their own instinct for self-preservation. When they do attempt to construct a boundary, it is often built of fragile glass rather than solid stone. They might softly mention that they are too tired or gently suggest that they cannot take on another task. But the moment the other person applies even a fraction of pressure, displaying a hint of disappointment or urgency, the boundary shatters. The empath caves in entirely, sacrificing their own needs on the altar of guilt. Empathy, in this scenario, becomes a weapon used against oneself. A low sense of self-worth whispers in their ear that their value is entirely dependent on their usefulness to others, making the act of saying no feel like an unforgivable crime. The tragic irony of these fragile boundaries is that every time they collapse, the precedent for future exploitation is set deeper into the stone of the relationship. When people learn that a soft push is all it takes to break down resistance, they will push harder the next time. It is a basic law of human conditioning. The empath becomes a captive to their own kindness, surrounded by individuals who know exactly how to pull the strings of guilt and compassion to get exactly what they want. The sanctuary is no longer just open. It is actively being looted, and the keeper is handing out the bags. It is an unfortunate law of the universe that the brightest lights attract the most desperate shadows. Because of their boundless patience, their deep listening skills, and their inability to set firm limits, these incredibly empathetic individuals often become magnets for toxic people. These are the needy, the deeply selfish, the emotionally wounded, and the narcissistic personalities of the world. Toxic individuals are perpetually scanning the horizon for a host, someone who will provide endless attention, resources, and emotional validation without demanding anything in return. To a toxic person, an unbounded empath is not a friend. They are an all-you-can-eat buffet of emotional energy. Unknowingly, the generous soul engages with these toxic entities, often believing they can heal them. They view the selfishness not as a threat, but as a symptom of a deep wound that just needs enough love to close. This creates a deeply dysfunctional, parasitic dynamic. The empath pours their golden energy into a black hole, hoping to fill it, while the toxic person comfortably takes, consumes, and demands more. In this agonizingly one-sided relationship, the giver is left hollowed out, their compulsive need to help entirely exploited by someone who lacks the capacity to ever return the favor. As this cycle continues, a profound loss of identity begins to occur. These empathetic individuals are celebrated for their miraculous ability to read minds. They can walk into a tense boardroom or a quiet living room and instantly map the emotional topography of the space. They adjust their posture, their tone of voice, and their words with magnificent ease, morphing perfectly to become exactly what the environment requires. They are the ultimate social chameleons, smoothing over rough edges and ensuring everyone feels seen and comfortable. But this constant adaptation comes with a devastating side effect. While they are absolute masters at reading the minds and hearts of everyone else, they become total strangers to themselves. When the noise of the world finally fades, and they are left alone in the quiet of their own room, a haunting silence takes over. If you were to ask them, "What do you want? What brings you joy? What are your actual needs?" they might stare back at you with a terrifying blankness. Because their internal compass has spent a lifetime pointing toward the north of other people's desires, the needle simply spins wildly when asked to point inward. They have spent so much time being what others need them to be, they have forgotten who they were before the world told them what to do. Compounding this loss of self is a deeply ingrained, almost phobic avoidance of conflict. Because their primary psychological drive is the maintenance of external harmony, the very concept of interpersonal friction feels like a physical threat to their nervous system. Standing up for oneself, demanding respect, or enforcing a boundary inevitably causes a temporary disruption in the emotional atmosphere. It creates tension, and to an overly empathetic soul, tension feels like failure. They would rather absorb the pain, swallow the injustice, and quietly carry the burden than introduce the harsh noise of an argument into their environment. This fear of negative emotions traps them in a silent prison. When a toxic person or a demanding family member continues to trample over their invisible boundaries, the empath does not fight back. They do not know how to engage in the healthy, necessary conflict that clears the air and establishes mutual respect. Instead, they retreat inward. They rationalize the poor behavior of others, finding excuses for why they are being treated poorly, all to avoid the terrifying prospect of a confrontation. Because they never practice the art of setting boundaries, the muscle of self-defense entirely atrophies, leaving them completely reliant on avoidance as their only shield. But human endurance has its limits. A soul cannot survive purely on the fumes of other people's happiness. The swallowed anger, the repressed exhaustion, and the silent resentment do not simply vanish. They accumulate. Deep within the core of the giver, a quiet storm begins to brew. The physical body begins to ache, the mind begins to fog, and the once radiant joy of helping others turns into a heavy, suffocating dread. The empath begins to feel utterly trapped by their own life, suffocating under the weight of 1,000 unsaid no's and a lifetime of compromised desires. This is when the famous, yet deeply misunderstood, phenomenon occurs. The silent departure, the emotional severing. When the pain of being consumed finally outweighs the fear of conflict, the deeply empathetic soul does not scream or throw things. Instead, they quietly, resolutely, and permanently close the door. They cut off contact with the toxic friends, the demanding relatives, and the parasitic partners. It seems sudden to the outside world, a shock to those who thought the well would never run dry. But to the empath, it is a matter of sheer survival. It is the final, desperate act of a dying lighthouse turning off its beam to save the last drop of oil for itself. Yet, this drastic measure of entirely cutting people off is a symptom of the disease, not the cure. True healing for the chronically nice soul begins with a profound awakening. It is the terrifying but beautiful realization that you cannot truly love the world if you do not first fiercely love yourself. It is the understanding that a sanctuary is only sacred because it has walls and a locked door, allowing the keeper to choose who enters and who must stay outside. Boundaries are not acts of cruelty. They are the ultimate acts of self-respect. They are the beautiful fences that protect the delicate garden of your empathy from being trampled by careless feet. Learning to say no is a grueling process for the overly empathetic mind. It feels like learning to speak a foreign language with a clumsy tongue. The guilt will scream. The fear of abandonment will whisper dark threats. But pushing through that initial discomfort is the only path to genuine freedom. When an empath learns to tolerate the temporary disappointment of others, they reclaim their own life force. They begin to understand that they are not responsible for managing the emotional weather of the entire universe. They learn that holding space for someone else's pain does not require absorbing that pain into their own bones. As they walk this path of self-discovery, they must also learn the quiet art of turning their legendary mind-reading skills inward. They must sit in the silence, face the terrifying blankness within, and patiently ask themselves, "What do I desire?" They must learn to treat themselves with the exact same breathtaking generosity they have so freely given to everyone else. The journey from being a chronic people-pleaser to an empowered empath is not about losing one's kindness. It is about upgrading that kindness from a reactive reflex to a conscious, guarded choice. It is about becoming a fortress of warmth rather than a burning house. If you resonate with this silent struggle, know that your empathy is a divine gift, a rare and beautiful grace in a world that often feels entirely too cold, but you must protect that grace. Do not let the beauty of your heart become the instrument of your own destruction. May you find the courage to build your walls, the wisdom to lock your doors when the night grows dark, and the profound peace that comes from finally coming home to yourself. Guard your light fiercely, so that when you do choose to shine it upon the world, it is warm, brilliant, and truly everlasting. May you walk in peace and unyielding strength.